Hello, Meoni here and welcome back to another video. This time I wanted to highlight a very interesting interview in regards to lore and how it's created, which is all courtesy of MMORPG.com, and the article will be of course linked in the description for you to go and give them some love. But obviously all respect to them for this fantastic interview where they sat down with Final Fantasy XIV's lore team, both Oda-san and Ishikawa-san, who have been responsible for Stormblood's storyline. The first question was, how did it feel to be part of a project where the initial product was totally destroyed and then rebuilt from scratch? Was it liberating or stressful, etc.? Oda replied, I joined the Final Fantasy XIV project just after it came under Yoshida-san's leadership in March 2011. I only learned of the Realm Reborn plan when I was part of the team. Whilst I did foresee a difficulty regarding the story when thinking about how we were going to create it from scratch whilst updating the previous Final Fantasy XIV version, I also did get excited at the idea that if this was a success, it would be, without a doubt, one of the most impactful things I've ever worked on. What was the biggest challenge for your work during this period of transition? Not destroying the feelings and experiences that the players of the previous Final Fantasy XIV had. On the other hand, we also had to make it easy for the large number of new players joining with Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn to understand the world setting and the story with ease. Handling both of these at once was a challenge, especially with the previous Final Fantasy XIV lore and story, as it was pretty difficult to grasp. I felt that it was difficult to find a method of expressing the basic lore easily without changing anything within it. Next they ask, how do you go about crafting stories that have a wide-reaching global appeal and remain accepting without being too simple? Ishikawa takes this question with, I think it's important to frequently ask myself, how would I feel about this if I were a player myself? Anything too simple would of course get boring, whilst too much of a more difficult script would also make people lose interest in reading it all. I take care to constantly think about how it will feel to the audience. That is not to think, is this fun to write, but would this be fun to play? Is there a challenge involved in writing a story for adventure where there's no real end to the adventure? Actually, it's something I find interesting, as it can only be done with this project. There are things that I wasn't able to include in the game at first, which I was able to years afterwards. But as it's a long-term operation, there is always a worry about the restrictions we have on data, though. How do you handle story pacing when people could drop the main thread of a story or quest and spend hours doing something else only to come back to it later? The UI in Final Fantasy XIV is constantly evolving, and since Stormblood, you don't lose where the next quest needed to continue the main scenario is, even if you drop it halfway through. So I kind of feel like the way we create the story isn't that different from an offline RPG, saying that we take care to ensure that there's time for players to think, oh, I've come to this point, so I will run the roulette, or I might take a break and craft some stuff, as there are various small branches coming out from the one main storyline. What challenge is there in creating a sense of continuity between each expansion to the original story and world without making it seem both wildly unfamiliar yet not too similar to what's come before? Ishikawa responds, the best method of not allowing a story and the stage to disassociate is for the main scenario writers to think up the settings for the land and groundwork of the expansions. But the problem with that is the amount of work that we make for ourselves increases immensely. And then laughs. What aspect of your work in Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn have you found most inspiring or enjoyable? Ishikawa responds, these days it takes over 3 years to develop a high quality game. As a result, I feel that a unique strength of Final Fantasy XIV is that patches are released every 3.5 months, and expansions approximately every 2 years. Players also give us feedback straight away, so we get to see how much they enjoy it, and because of that I cannot see myself wanting to go back to working on titles that have a large amount of time before their release. How much of a challenge was it to create a new set of world lore for A Realm Reborn that doesn't betray its origins in 14's original game? Oda takes this question. There's no mistaking that creating it from scratch was easier. When working on the background for a game expansion, do you also work on expanding the lore, or are all expansions direct results of aspects of A Realm Reborn's world that you've already outlined in some aspect? Oda says, there are two patterns, the fundamental world lore that has already been determined and cannot be altered, and then changes made where necessary. When the new content and jobs are added, we think about the gameplay and playability first, and then the lore is considered thereafter. How difficult is it to strike a balance between making a fantasy world that makes sense, but is also wildly fantastical without it being unbelievable? Oda says it's important to maintain certain rules, for example drawing a line between what can and cannot be done with magic, having conditions to use, etc., even with it being a fantasy, but it can be hard to share those rules amongst all of the many staff members. With a project like 14 in which there are so many staff, it can be especially tricky to get everyone on the same page. And a final question, what aspect of your work in Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn have you found the most inspiring or enjoyable? Oda replies, as an MMORPG that has major updates released every 3.5 months, it's really fun to be able to see the reaction from players regarding what we've created so frequently. It's a huge inspiration that we can hear what players have to say through various things like sites like Reddit, videos with gameplay in social media, and actual events. So there we go, that was a fantastic little article written up by, it just says guest writer for MMORPG.com there. It's a shame that the actual name of the author there isn't listed, but regardless I will link this in the description of the video. This is definitely something that interested me, the whole process of making something fantastical and grandiose, but making sure that it's grounded in the actual lore and various rules that they've imposed upon themselves. I think that's a lot of the reason there isn't too much explanation about certain things in the game, aside from what we get in the Encyclopedia Eorzea physical books and other lore stories. There's a lot of mystery, and I think that mystery is primarily given to us so that we can sort of think for ourselves and allows them to move outside of the box a little bit. Either way, this was a very interesting article. Thank you once again to MMORPG.com for this source, and thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.